All right, welcome my friends to episode 658 of Extreme Health Radio. I hope you guys are having a great Friday. I always love Fridays because not only is it Friday, but we get to talk to really cool and interesting people and go down the rabbit trail of some of the more important aspects of our health. And it's kind of a black hole, isn't it? Trying to figure out what to do, what supplements to take, what you should focus on. There's so many people talking about different aspects of health and everyone talking about how their thing is the most important thing. So we're trying to sort of disseminate all that information for you and help you to focus on some of the more foundational protocols, which is really important, I think, for us to not go down these rabbit trails of different things that don't necessarily work or move the needle as much with your health. So today we have Morley Robbins on the show. I think this is his 5th or 6th time on the show, so it's round number 6, I think, with the root cause protocol. So we'll introduce him in just a second. If you're new to our show, we do shows every Friday morning at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time. So tag a friend, join us, share our shows, and you can join in the chat room. And after the break, we'll answer some questions from you guys if you have any specific questions. And just so you know, if you want to ask those questions, do so on the YouTube Extreme Health Radio channel. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging for me to jump back from multiple Facebook accounts to Twitter to YouTube. So make sure to type those in all caps on the YouTube live feed there. So that is out of the way, and we have a lot of cool shows coming up, which I'll tell you about later on in the show. This is episode 658, so if you want to grab the show notes, links to Morley's website. I'll try to take good notes today of anything we talk about, links and things like that, or sponsors. If you want to check out the sponsors for today's show, everything will be available at extremehealthradio.com/658. So many of you guys have been writing and asking, hey, how come Morley Robbins is on so much? We love him, but he seems to be on a lot. And so the reason why is because I believe after doing over 650 shows that he is, I think he's a pioneer in this movement. And I don't think many people are talking about the things that he's talking about. I mean, he sends me videos on ATP synthase and the mitochondrial function and how photons work and electrons work. I mean, he is just a researcher like you wouldn't believe. And he's an amazing guy. And I think that his work is foundational to all of our health. We can stop worrying about all these other things and focus on some of the things he talks about, which is mainly minerals and only a couple minerals at that. If you're unfamiliar with his work, he has a BA in biology from Denison University in Ohio, has an MBA from George Washington University in healthcare administration, which he did for over 30 years. He's a nutritional wellness coach, a functional diagnostic nutritionist, and most importantly, after all that, he's the creator of the root cause protocol, and he founded the Magnesium Advocacy Group in 2012 and formerly was the Magnesium Man, and now he's more known as the Iron Man, but both are probably equally as important to each other. How you doing, Morley? How are you, my friend?
I'm having an identity crisis. I'm not sure who I am.
I know. Who are you, Magnesium Man or Iron Man?
Well, no, actually, I don't think Magnesium Man fits anymore.
No?
I'm morphing into. Some people think I should be Mineral Man.
Mineral Man. I like that.
Yeah, Mineral Man. Kind of cover the bases. But then one of my dear friends who helped me really get the MAG Facebook group not just off the ground, but really managed it for about 5 years. Her name is Marilyn Hampstead.
Okay.
And she used a term yesterday where she made reference to it's a term for a Spanish term, curandero.
Okay.
Curandero, and they are shamanic healers that use folk medicine.
Oh.
But what I love about it is the first two letters are Cu.
Uh-huh.
Then we can see the symbol for copper.
Yes.
Which is the cure, curandano. It's like it's right there. So,
oh my gosh.
I'm going to have that tattooed across my forehead.
I know. We need to get you a tattoo and a shirt and a hat and everything.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
No, I don't know. This has been a fascinating period. I love that the people are like, well, he's interesting, but why do you have him on so much?
I know, right?
That's sort of a backward compliment, right?
Yeah, no, it's great because I think that people just don't understand that minerals run everything. You know, people do heavy
Yeah,
metal cleanses, they do hormone, shifting and trying to balance their hormones, and they don't realize
yeah.
they do colon cleanses, but minerals run everything. Without minerals, we're dead, right?
That's exactly right. And it's so foundational that you would have thought that at some point in our education, maybe in kindergarten or first grade, they would have mentioned that. But it's a very well kept secret. I think
Mm-hmm.
if um, more of us had grown up on a farm, we would have known that how important minerals are, because farmers do know how central they are to their profession. But it's lost on an urban world that depends on electricity and not minerals.
Mm-hmm.
So very different way of thinking. But I wanted to share this experience this morning at Starbucks, which I think really epitomizes um, the whole problem. Um, I'll start with a historical uh, reference. Many years ago, when I was in Chicago, I went to this one Starbucks, and I would get there, at 5 o'clock, and at 5:30 every morning, this guy would come in, and he'd order a venti iced tea, and he would put
Mm-hmm.
three packs of the yellow sucralose into his iced tea, stir it up, take a sip, and then leave. And I
Ah.
watched him do this. I watched him do this for months.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I got up the courage and I went up to him and I said, I'm just curious. Where did you read that that was a good idea to put that sucralose into your iced tea?
Yeah, good
And
question.
you can
Yeah.
imagine 5:30 in the morning. He's kind of like, what are
Uh-oh.
you doing in my space?
Right.
And and so I said, you might want to do some research. And that one packet, has 200 times more sweetness than the same size packet of sugar. He
Right,
goes,
right.
oh, really? Turns out he was a physician.
Oh.
He said, thank you. I didn't know that. So I didn't see him for a couple months. And then he pops back in, 5:30, gets his venti. He goes over. I'm like I've got my binoculars on.
Right. Yeah.
And he didn't use sucralose. He used the blue packets.
What is that? Which one is that?
It's it's another synthetic sweetener that's just as
Oh
bad
my
as the sucralose. And I
jeez.
just went, oh my God. It's just like, so I just let it go. I didn't say a word.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we fast forward now. This is 8 or 9 years later, this morning,
Mm-hmm.
after having been in lockdown for 2 months, like everybody else. And I
I
think you're
know.
probably still in lockdown,
Yeah.
but they took Starbucks away from me, which was a very rude thing to do,
I know,
because that
especially
was
to
my,
you, right? That's where you do all your
yeah, yeah.
research.
It's all about me, right?
Yeah.
This is my research facility.
Yeah.
And I'd seen this guy day before yesterday in a downpour get out of his van, go into the back of the van to get his umbrella, and then go into the store. When my wife and I looked at each other and like, that's not a good way to store your umbrella. Does that make
No.
sense?
No, not at all.
So I saw him today. He was standing outside waiting. We were both waiting for our orders.
Uh-huh.
And he was wearing his mask.
Okay. Good. Good citizen.
I have not worn my mask once. I smile and
Likewise.
then
Likewise.
yeah, okay,
Likewise. Not
yeah,
once.
fist
Fist
bump.
bump.
Yeah. So don't get too close though.
Yeah.
But so I'm standing about 8 feet away from him,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I'm just curious. Do you know the difference between nanometer and millimeter? And he looks up and he goes, well, yes, I do. I said, well, the holes in your mask are millimeter and the pathogens are nanometer. And this
Uh-oh.
guy, with a look of disgust, he says, sir, you're completely wrong. I went, oh, wow. Because I just read that yesterday in a
Yeah,
scientific
yeah.
article.
Oh yeah,
And so-
it means nothing, right? It means nothing.
right. And he said, so what's your education? I said, well, I have a master's in business. He said, well, I'm a doctor and I have a master's in public health from Harvard. And I went, oh, like I'm supposed to be impressed.
Right, right.
And
Interesting.
so he starts to accost me about it. He says, well, these viruses are alive. I said, really? Well, why are the experts telling us that they're dead? That they are a reaction to a toxin? He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I just want to know what the trigger is. What's the real trigger? It's not the virus. Well, at this point, there are like 3 or 4 other people watching this exchange where we're almost, fisticuff.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so it was fascinating. And then I could tell he was not happy with me, and he
No,
was.
no.
So I played the mineral card. I
Okay.
said, I'm just curious. How much do you know about copper? It was like I punched him in the face. He goes, well, I know it's a stable metal. And I said, well, actually, it's the mineral that runs your immune system. And I went to hand him my card. And he said, sir, distance, social distance, get back.
No way. Oh my gosh.
And Justin,
Ugh.
that's why there's so many sick people out there. Because doctors, I've heard this from scores and scores of practitioners, whether they be MDs, naturopaths, chiropractors, acupuncturists, physician's assistants, nurses, whatever.
Mm.
What's the one word they've never heard in their training? Copper. They've never heard the word copper. And to me, it's an absolute expose of why the world is in fear, why the world is, in some parts of the world, are still in lockdown. Again, it's become a political issue here in the States. We don't need to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's such gross misunderstanding about how the immune system really works. And so what I decided to do, again, when the pundits tell you to go this way, I always go the other way.
You got to.
And you got to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been studying some very important things that I think we can get into today. I decided to study how the immune system really works. It's very interesting. I decided to, once they started talking about hydroxychloroquine,
Mm-hmm.
or as it's known affectionately by the urban crowd, the D-Rox,
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a malaria drug. So the clue there is that there's a parasite involved in this COVID-19 dynamic. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's a mycoplasma. And mycoplasma, you think the viruses are small? Mycoplasma are really tiny, and they get right through your mask. You can have 5 masks on, and they're still going to come through.
So are you saying, Morley, that you think there's a connection, or that this COVID-19
Oh,
is a parasitic infection?
again, we have to come back to, what is a virus? A virus is a reaction to a toxin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the threat.
No.
Again, what tripped the wire of the virus? There's some toxic event. And there are a lot of different theories out there.
Mm-hmm.
One, of course, is around a mycoplasma. A lot of people are convinced that. Then
Mm-hmm.
we've got the exosome theory.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got the 5G theory.
5G,
Well,
right?
it might be that it's all 3. I don't think you know what? We're still arguing about, there's still arguments about the Black Plague. Scientists are still arguing about what really caused that.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't necessary that it was, there could have been multiple factors, one of which was what we accept it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're still arguing about the Spanish flu. And in fact, the truth is only now beginning to come out that the Rockefeller Institute did an experiment with vaccines at Fort Riley, Kansas in 1918, which is what triggered the whole crisis worldwide.
Interesting.
And there's a very, very important documentary around that.
What's that documentary called? Do you know? I'd love to watch that.
I will have to get you the name.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, it's not a very popular theory.
No.
Because again, we're supposed to believe that vaccines save lives, right? That's the catchphrase.
Yeah,
Vaccines save lives. Well, there's never been a clinical trial of vaccines, ever. People don't know that.
No.
There's not been not one study. Not a placebo-controlled double-blind test.
What did that doctor at Starbucks say to you when you told him about the Rockefeller? I'm assuming you didn't go that far.
We didn't get that far.
No.
I don't know if he'll ever talk to me again.
No.
I'm gonna apologize for making his day. I'm sure I got him off to a really bad start. But the important thing is he thinks because of his education, he's got this really expansive knowledge of what causes people to get sick. I
Right.
would argue that he has a very narrow, scripted understanding of how pathogens work. And again, we're back to the particle field conflict,
Mm-hmm.
Pasteur versus Béchamp.
Mm-hmm.
And the particleists, they're going crazy with this COVID-19.
They love it.
And
Right.
and so what did I focus on? The bioenergetic field. I've got some very fascinating information about that because people don't realize that the immune system runs on energy. I mean, it's intuitively it makes sense, but you don't stop and think, well, all we've ever heard about our immune system, oh, it's 80% of it's in your gut, and blah
Right.
blah blah. It's like, no, we can get really granular about it and
This
begin to
this
distinguish. Go ahead.
our immune system is so multifaceted, multi-layered, and multi-cross-referential, and it exists all over the body. People think, like you just said, oh, 80% of it's in your gut, but there's multiple arms and multiple layers in each arm. It's a full
Right.
entire system, and for a pathogen to disable someone's entire backup
Right.
immune system, and it's almost impossible.
Well, it is almost impossible. And what did COVID-19 teach us? It taught us that the biological age of 80-year-olds and 50-year-olds with one chronic condition
Mm-hmm.
and 30-year-olds with two chronic conditions and anyone with any kind of lung disorder are all the same age.
Mm-hmm.
They can't produce energy in their immune system to respond to a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And what that underscores is the term immunocompetence, big word. And there's a whole field of science called immunometabolism,
Mm-hmm.
the intersection of mitochondria and our ability to respond to pathogens. And if the immune system isn't able to discern what's out there and then able to decide what arm and leg am I going to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and then have backup systems to the backup system,
Mm-hmm.
well, then we've got problems, right? And so the probably the best video that I've ever seen on the immune system was something that was put up on YouTube January 2nd of this year by Dr. V.A. Shiva Ayuday. And he's suddenly kind of come out of the woodwork. He's the guy that invented email. Very talented guy,
Mm-hmm.
multiple degrees from MIT. But he did a very nice job of explaining the immune system. And we have the innate immune system, and we have the adaptive immune system. And we have interferon that communicates back and forth between the two. And then we have the gut and the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all communicating, as you alluded to in your remarks, they're all communicating with each other. Well, guess what they all have? They all have mitochondria. They've all got to be able to have energy to think. So to get a sense of the importance of IQ, we are arguably the most evolved species on the planet. I mean, some would probably take issue with that, with how crazy we are sometimes, but ostensibly we are the Earth's consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a pretty evolved nervous system, which has a lot of gray matter. And the brain is 2% of our body weight, but it consumes 20% of the oxygen that we consume every day.
20%. Okay.
Right. So there's a tenfold differential. And that energy is used, that oxygen is used to make energy. Very important function. You can't think and you can't engage in higher orders of thinking if you don't have energy. Neurons require lots of energy. there's a part of our brain called the substantia nigra. And if people have ever heard of Parkinson's disease,
Mm-hmm.
where people have, difficulty controlling their tremors, well, this is a very specific part of the brain that has 900,000 cells in it, neurons,
Neurons. Okay.
900,000 neurons making dopamine. But what's really important is that each neuron has 2 million mitochondria.
2 million.
And then we step back and we refer to the research by Paul Cobain, who did his work at University of Saskatchewan in Canada, but he's now at Auburn University here in the States. And he did a study back in 2004 and 2006, where he was able to calculate that there's 50,000 atoms of copper in yeast mitochondria. And yeast mitochondria is used to study human mitochondria. Now, I've got calls into 5 copper experts here around the world, and I have one question for them: how many copper atoms are in human mitochondria? And you know what the answer is?
What do they say?
Crickets. They
Nothing?
don't know.
They don't know.
Nothing. They don't know, or they don't want us to know. So look, we're going to use the yeast model. So we've got 900,000 times 2 million
times 2 million
times 50,000, and it's a really big number, right?
Right.
Now that you've got that really big number in your head, guess what Parkinson's is when 66% of the neurons don't work. So we've just lost 540,000 neurons times 2 million times 50,000.
Okay.
Where's the disease? There's no disease. It's metabolic dysfunction. And what's the known property of Parkinson's is iron accumulation in the substantia nigra.
Now, why do you think iron would accumulate? I guess in each person, iron accumulates in different tissues based on maybe their genetic makeup or some unknown factor, do you think?
More so based on their emotions than genetic makeup.
Okay.
And their diet, of course. And the thing is, there are layers and layers of metabolic dysfunction that lead to iron overload in the brain. But the starting point, very simple starting point, if you don't have copper in your diet, iron will accumulate in the tissue. And it starts in the liver, moves into the pancreas, the kidneys, the heart, and the brain.
So tell people,
this is not rocket science.
So for people that are unaware of your ratios, tell people a little bit about the amount of, like, the 30 trillion red blood cells and the amount of copper that's needed to regulate that, and how 80% of our copper has been depleted in the soil over time. So explain a little bit of that for people to understand how little copper we actually have.
Yeah, so you and I have livers and brains. Again, the copper composition of our liver and our brain is the same. It's about 7 milligrams. But when we were born, our liver had 70 milligrams of copper that we got from dear old mom.
Okay.
An enormous download. I came across I found some of the most amazing studies during lockdown. So
I bet.
I bitch and moan about it, but it's actually been a very beneficial time for me for my research. But this one study was from a group of veterinarians up in Canada studying copper deficiency in ruminants.
Okay.
Cows, sheep, and goats.
Okay.
And Justin, they had precision about how much copper was downloaded in the mother heifer in the first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester of the pregnancy to produce her offspring. And precise measurements.
Okay.
I've never seen anything like that for humans.
Yeah, nothing.
Ever. Nothing. Nada. because it would.
How would you do that in a human? Is it possible to know that?
How do they do it in a cow? I have no idea, but they did do it.
Okay.
So they did do it. They measured it very precisely. And so the thing is, we've got to back up a step. We live on a planet with oxygen, right? 21% of the air we breathe has oxygen in it.
Mm-hmm.
Oxygen is the second most reactive element on planet Earth after fluoride. And I think your listeners and your followers are savvy enough to know that fluoride is not their friend.
No.
Well, guess what? Neither is oxygen. And the only reason why we're having this conversation and why we have this technology so we can have this conversation is because copper saved the day 2.5 billion years ago and enabled us, because there wasn't any oxygen on the planet when it first formed 4.5 billion years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 2 billion years, oxygen started to be given off in photosynthesis. That's a big deal. So we have 21% oxygen, but when oxygen was only 0.1%, 99% of life on the planet disappeared. And it's called the Great Oxygen Event.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very well-recorded moment in history by all these astrobiologists. How they know this, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But the point is, they do know it. And copper came to the rescue. Copper enabled us to harness oxygen and put it to use in an aerobic environment. And what I'm very excited about is I just found a scientist at Johns Hopkins University. I grew up in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. My nickname is Baltimorely. And my mom used to work at Hopkins years and years ago. And Justin, it's taken me 10 years to find this guy. His name is Kenneth Calden. He's a very renowned scientist. And guess what he studies? Copper and oxygen reactions. And it's absolutely amazing. And so, Carlin, Karlin.
Carlin. Kenneth Carlin, okay.
Kenneth Carlin. And the guy's a genius. He has what's called the Carlin Kinetics Lab at Johns Hopkins. Again, I've been studying copper for about 7 or 8 years. And just today, I discovered his signature study in a dissertation from a student at the University of Hamburg, Germany. And she made reference to some of the work that he did. So I looked it up and it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's been hiding in the woodwork, and I'm going to track him down. I'm going to try to meet with him because he understands this copper oxygen thing better than anybody else on the planet.
So copper regulates iron, right? But both copper and iron are the only sort of metals that we have in our body that interact with oxygen. Is that correct?
Right. Okay. And so copper's unique gift to humanity and to any life form on the planet, plants or animals.
Mm-hmm.
It regulates iron and it harnesses oxygen. And what most people don't know is that we use the oxygen that we breathe. It becomes in our mitochondria, there are 40 quadrillion, there's 40 quadrillion mitochondria in the human body.
Okay.
So we really need a lot of oxygen to support that. But that oxygen actually is accepting electrons so that we can release energy in the mitochondria. And it's a very cool transaction. And that video that I sent you
fascinating.
Builds on that.
Yeah,
It is
fascinating. Yeah.
Because that little rotor, the little thing that's spinning around, It's spinning at 9,000 revolutions per minute. It's the smallest motor on planet Earth.
And it produces some kind of magnetic or electric field, right?
Well, what it's really producing is ATP.
Right.
It's spinning at 9,000 revolutions per minute, which means it's making 27,000 ATP every minute. And just to put it into context, we need a billion ATP just for one heartbeat.
Right. Yeah.
So your original question was about copper and how it's outmaneuvered. We have about 90 milligrams of copper in our body. We have about 5,000 milligrams of iron in our body. And so a good way for people to picture this is picture copper being a Navy SEAL surrounded by 60 ninja warriors. And that Navy SEAL regulates those 60 ninja warriors in our body. And it's a very humbling thing to think about. And then we start to get into the suppression of copper in the soil, in the plants, in the animals, and now in our bodies and our tissue. And people have been trained, like circus bears, to believe that they have a disease like Parkinson's, when in fact it's a dietary disorder. Because historically, our country has not honored organic food, and our farmers have not been taught to raise minerally dense food, or even to restore minerals on the soil. And what happens is, as you work with soil and keep pulling more and more minerals out of it, it becomes dirt. Well, there's a lot of farms that are on dirt now that need to be returned to soil. And the only way to do that is to introduce minerals, and then the microbes come to feed off the minerals. And the microbes are doing the heavy lifting. They're making sure that the minerals get into the root system of the plant.
Super fascinating.
It is. Well, it's how farming really works.
Yeah.
It isn't these big agro combines and stuff. It's all being done at the micro level by these microbes, making sure that the minerals get into the root system. And you don't know that.
It's so utterly fascinating when you start looking into all this. I hope you guys are enjoying this show with Morley Robbins. This is episode 658. We're going to take a little bit of a break right now, but when we come back, I want to ask him about this sort of idea about energy when it comes to our immune system. Because if you take sort of the analogy of maybe like a work site or a construction site or something like that, if you take that analogy and you think about, okay, so now you have a bunch of workers at the construction site ready to build a house. They have all the energy in the world, right? It's fresh in the morning. They just had their breakfast, got all the energy in the world. But now they need to communicate with one another, and now they need to have the tools to be able to construct the new house or the new building. So it's not just energy. You could have energy, but if you don't have the right communication, the right manpower, the right tools, nothing really gets done. So I want to sort of put together this whole idea when we come back. And I highly recommend, guys, looking at Morley Robbins' root cause protocol. If you are sort of flip-flopping around in your health and you don't know where to start and you're not sure, and someone's talking about herbs and someone's talking about light and someone's talking about this and that, cleanses and detox, there's so many different aspects of health. But if you're doing all those things and your magnesium levels aren't where they need to be and your iron levels are through the roof, everything you do requires energy. So it's really important to get to the root cause, get your minerals lined up and balanced and at optimum levels, and then you can start working on these other areas of health. So if you guys want to go over to Root Cause Protocol RCP123.org, and we'll put links if you're listening on today's podcast to RCP123.org at extremehealthradio.com/658. And so I want to share with you guys a cool supplement that we like and we take, and it is called Colostrum, and we love it. And I'll show you guys if you guys are watching on video right here. And I think it's one of the best sort of supplements. I'm not really into too many supplements. I take a few, but this is more of a food. It's more of a powder that you can add to different confections, culinary confections and things like that, that really make your coffee taste better, your smoothies taste better. And Colostrum's a really, 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 really amazing superfood. So listen to Daniel Vitalis talk about it.
So colostrum is the first food that all baby mammals receive, or all baby mammals, natural baby mammals receive. So when we were born, our mother's breasts were initially filled with colostrum before actually there was any milk available to us. And in an ideal circumstance, that's the first thing we drink. Well, the same is true for all mammals, and it's especially true for cows. One of the interesting things about bovine colostrum, cow colostrum, is that it has a really unique impact on human health. This has been studied for a really long time. There are literally thousands of studies in the scientific literature showing the effects of bovine colostrum on human health, on human immunity, on restoring the gut lumen, the gut tract, repairing damage to the gut, and helping to restore health after things like IBS or Crohn's or diverticulitis or any of the sort of inflammatory bowel diseases. And it does this through a number of actions, but primarily through the fact that it contains all of the known mammalian growth factors. And these proteins that we call growth factors initiate growth in tissue throughout the body. And each type of tissue in our body has a specific growth factor. Well, they're all found in colostrum.
Yeah, my friends, check out this colostrum from Surthrival. It's my favorite. I love it. We add it to the kids' smoothies. We add it to different things that we make in the kitchen, and our coffee drink in the morning. We'll throw a big heaping teaspoon of colostrum in. It's just a great thing to have on hand. And if you're looking to sort of upgrade if you make smoothies or whatever you make in the kitchen, you can add some of this to it, and it's a great. I just think it's such a great supplement to utilize and to have. For that reason, it's funny because he talks about upregulating health and things, but he can't make any claims, so you can't say it does this or that. But it's I would encourage you guys to look further into it and consider adding this to your kitchen as part of a regular sort of immune system and gut health protocol. It's just a great supplement. And then something else I want to tell you guys too is the Relax Far Infrared Sauna. And I don't know if you guys do sauna therapy, but sauna therapy has been used for thousands of years by almost every culture throughout time in the history of the earth. And sweating and detoxifying through this far infrared light. It's actually a light. It's actually light therapy. This far infrared frequency of wavelength. And so what it does is it helps to oscillate the fat cells. And one of the places in our body where we store known toxins from our environment is in the fat cells. And this helps to excrete those out and sort of oscillate your fat cells and change the shape of them and squeeze them to release some of these toxins, which you can then excrete out through the sweat glands. And here's our biological dentist, Dr. Stuart Nunley. Speaking of, a little caveat here. If you're looking for a biological dentist, Dr. Nunley is the most amazing guy ever. He's a good friend of ours. We went and visited him, I think for the third time last year. Just a great salt of the earth kind of guy in Marble Falls, Texas. So if you're looking for a good biological dentist, Dr. Nunley is incredible. HealthySmilesForLife.com. But anyway, he was diagnosed, or no, he wasn't diagnosed, but he was going through a series of tests, and he thought that he had Lou Gehrig's disease because at the time he was removing people's mercury fillings without any protection. He didn't know any better. And so after years and years and years of removing people's mercury fillings, he got more and more and more sick. And one of the ways that he used to detoxify after he discovered the work of Dr. Hal Huggins is sauna therapy. So here's Dr. Nunley talking about how he used it in his life.
You know what I chose to do? I chose to go very, very slow as I detox. So one of the things that I did is I invested in an infrared sauna, which was huge. That was a big, big part of my healing because, interestingly enough, many times patients who have heavy metal toxicity lose the ability to sweat. And so I was one of those. I could not break a sweat. And the infrared sauna helped me to retrain my body to be able to sweat. It was a huge part of my overall detox.
Doesn't Hal Huggins, Dr. Huggins, say as long as there's more going out than what's coming in, you're okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right on that.
Yeah, so he did sauna therapy for, it was, I think 6-8 months, and he was able to regain his health. And he talked with me personally about that when I was at his clinic last time, and just, appreciation for this kind of technology was just through the roof. And, sauna therapy, in my opinion, should be part of everyone's protocol. I mean, it's just kind of like one of those things that you do 3 or 4 times a week, if you can, to help detoxify these heavy metals and toxins out of your body. And here's Dr. Shade talking about the same thing.
How do I detoxify from plastics? I mean, you guys are using a sauna, and that's something I'd like to get. And what does a sauna do for us? A sauna is great. It's moving a number of different toxins. Remember, we talked about the mice, that if you put PCBs in there, then that made the mercury all that much worse. And sweating moves out a lot of plastics, volatiles, fat-based toxins. It's really good at moving those out, sweating those out. So that's how you're getting those out, and those are contributing to this synergistic soup inside the body. And so that's why they're good, is they're taking out a bunch of the different things in the soup.
A bunch of different things in the soup. But it's interesting because you look at the research and the amount of environmental and industrial chemicals being introduced into our environment, not just the food, or not just chemtrails, or even the fact that iron is liberated, through acid rain in our soils, and copper is being lowered to a great extent throughout the world in our food. And then you got these other toxins in our environment. And like Stephanie Seneff was saying when she was on her show a while back, that glyphosate, is now present in the air. And so we're breathing this stuff in. And so it's like, my goodness, just living in today's toxic world, we have to have a way. And, also, it's just really fun. You kind of get in your sauna. This thing, it breaks down super quick. You can set it up super easy. You can loan it to a friend. You don't have to, bust out a whole wall in your home. And you can just sit in there. Your head sticks out of it so you don't overheat, and you can watch a movie. I like to watch documentaries when I'm in there. It's my little spa time, and it's just a great way to detoxify. So I recommend bringing sort of these tools into your home as a way to make your home a little healing center, right? So I highly recommend it. If you guys are interested, if you're listening, or if you're listening on or watching on Facebook, if you're listening to the podcast, everything will be available at extremehealthradio.com/658. And if you're watching on YouTube, there should be links down in the description below. And you can learn more about the sauna and sauna therapy. We'll be right back with Morley Robbins. And when we come back, we'll take some questions in a little while from the YouTube chat room. Make sure to type them in all caps if you could. But when we come back, I want to talk about this idea of the construction site and energy, and the idea that the construction site that we're not building a home, but we're building our immune system. And so we have to have the moving pieces. We have to have the energy. We have to have the tools, these types of things. We'll kind of play on that a little bit, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Extreme Health Radio, and I hope you're enjoying this show. Please share it with your friends by tagging @Extreme Health Radio on Instagram. Stay tuned for new shows weekly.
Every Friday morning at 10:45 Pacific time, we're live on YouTube, as long as they'll have us, as long as the great cabal that is YouTube will allow us to broadcast on their platform. But so come join us on YouTube every Friday morning at 10:45, and you'll be able to see some of what we do, and you can stay up to date with all of our shows. And so we bring Morley back on and kind of dive into this idea of the construction site. We're building our immune system. We have to have all the tools, right? We have to have the energy, but it's great to have energy, but if you don't have tools or the ability to communicate, you're not going to build a whole lot, right?
Yeah. Let me, real quick, I'm going to get to your model there. I think it'd be a lot of fun to play with that. But real quick, 2 quick comments about your segue with the colostrum and the sauna.
Oh, sauna.
Yeah. So I emailed you a very important article about research that was done back in the 1930s to explain why colostrum is so important as a source for retinol, vitamin A, real vitamin A.
I didn't know that.
And, well, that's why
great.
colostrum is so important. And again, I think it's very easy to become overwhelmed in today's society. Oh, there are 1,000 reasons why I'm not feeling right. No, there's just a couple. You don't have minerals, and you don't have retinol in your diet. And so colostrum, I did not know what its concentration. The first line of the sentence. In 1933, Dan suggested that the calf received from 20 to 50 times as much vitamin A from colostrum as from whole milk. That's an enormous download of retinol. Why is retinol so important?
Wow.
We could spend a month of conversations just talking about retinol alone. But what it's very important for is putting copper inside ceruloplasmin, which is the copper protein that runs our body. And so retinol is outrageously important for our immune system, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Then with the red light, with sauna, what is red light? Red light and copper are the same thing. So what you're doing is your sauna is a crutch because there's not enough copper in your body to move the toxins. What moves the lymph system? It's copper. What stops it? Iron. And so the saunas are great. I mean, I burst out laughing. I hope people didn't see that. But when you said, I watch my documentaries when I'm in the sauna, I think that what a great use of your time.
I know.
And what a great healing discipline. But again, there are overlapping dynamics between what you're doing and what I'm talking about. But you didn't know that red light and copper were the same thing. And none of your listeners know that. And that's, again, it's just helping to build an awareness that, man, this copper thing must be really important. Wow, this retinol thing that I'm getting from the colostrum, that must be really important. It is really important. So then let's jump into the work site. Let's pretend we're building a 40-story building. It's going to have a lot of steel, right? And what's the steel made out of? Iron, right? And if a doctor were to describe that site, they would look you in the eye with a straight face, and they would tell you that the steel drives itself to the website or to the work site and delivers it. The steel can unload itself and store itself exactly where it's needed. The steel can go over and read the blueprint, know exactly where it's needed, that the steel can lift itself off the ground 30 stories and put itself in exactly the right position, and then the steel can bolt itself into place in perfect, precise placement. And they really believe that steel can do all that all by itself.
Just with nothing else, yep.
With nothing else.
Yeah.
And you and I both know, and the listeners know, that there are really gifted craftsmen who are delivering, unloading, storing, reading the blueprints, operating the cranes. Are you kidding me? One of the most important cranes in the body is called ferrochelatase, and it's inside our bone marrow. And what's it doing? It's a little crane that picks up iron and then drops it inside the heme protein.
Oh, okay.
So we got to make heme. Where's heme made? Oh, it's made in the mitochondria. Oh, yeah, that's where all that copper is, right? Yeah. So you think copper might be involved in the bulk of making the protein? And the last step, it's not the rate limiting step, but it's the last step. The last step is dropping that iron in. What's the first step? It is the rate limiting step. It's called ALAS. And guess what determines the success of ALAS? Retinol. Ding, ding, ding. So again, this is not taught in doctor school.
No.
It doesn't matter what the degree is. And so these basics of how functions take place and how energy is made, and again, inside those mitochondria, the 40 quadrillion, they all work the same way. They all have that little rotor. And the other part of it's called a stator and rotor. Rotor's moving, stator's stationary. And so oxygen comes through complex 4, which is what releases ADP to go over to complex 5, which is the rotor. Well, you can't get oxygen through that complex unless copper's there. And then the rotor's spinning, but what's really important is the ADP becomes ATP because of the presence of copper. So we cannot make energy in our body without copper. It is absolutely, the Latin phrase is sine qua non. It's absolutely essential. Absolutely essential to have copper. And in fact, there's a little swimming pool in the center of all mitochondria, and it's called the matrix copper pool. Very important.
So
That's where
copper.
that's where those 50,000 atoms of copper are hanging out in the pool.
So with copper being so downregulated in people's systems and the amount of copper in our food is being lowered and lowered, and the fact that people aren't eating as much animal food, so they're not getting the retinol, which helps load the copper into the ceruloplasmin, and all these steps that people are doing, maybe they're doing like a vegan diet or something where they're not getting that true vitamin A. So what's happening is people are, I guess the first sense that you could find that's going wrong is that you're just losing energy, right? You feel tired more often. And that would be probably the first sign, right? At least physically, that you're low on copper, right?
The loss of energy is the very first step of any condition, any label, any syndrome is energy loss. And what's fascinating is there is no yardstick for energy that's used by doctors. When was the last time you went to a doctor and they got out this tool and then went up and measured your ATP production?
Right.
They don't do it, right?
No.
And what do they typically say? And I've had doctors say this when I go in, and this years ago before I did this work, and I was feeling kind of fatigued. I was living out of aluminum tubes called airplanes and bouncing from one coast to the next and feeling kind of fatigued. And the doctor said, "What do you expect? You're getting older." That's not an answer.
No.
Why is my energy production dropping? And then we go into the world of alternative health. Well, it's your adrenals, or we go into the world of allopathic medicine. It's your thyroid.
Yeah.
No, it's lack of copper in the mitochondria. And there's reason why the adrenals are involved, and there's reason why the thyroid is involved. But the thyroid doesn't run the body. That's just allopathic witchcraft. So the thing is, your point about communication is very astute. It isn't just that there are craftsmen. There are craftsmen talking to each other. And how are they doing it? How do our cell phones work, Justin? They use cellular technology, right?
Right.
What is the actual communication that's used? It's called red light. The red light that runs our cell phones runs our mitochondria. And red light is very important in the mitochondria. They produce red light. They love red light. And so to the mitochondria, red light is go. If the light becomes green, that's stop. It means it's not working right. It's just the opposite of the streets. Fascinating.
So what's interesting too is if you use this analogy of sort of a construction site and we're building an immune system or a tower of some kind, it's not as if we need all the people and the construction workers to be able to communicate. We do need that, but it's not like we're building it from scratch. We have all of those default functions in the body that want to do that already, right? So when we provide the energy, we don't have to also build all these other secondary systems. They're kind of inherent within us if we can get them to work and give them the energy that they need, right?
Right.
Is that correct, you think?
It is correct. The thing is, the whole fight on planet Earth is about the management of the oxygen molecule. Again, second most reactive element on the planet. And what copper does is it harnesses that energy so that it enables us to make energy, make enzymes work, and then when oxidative stress is produced, which is a byproduct of making energy, you're going to give off exhaust. Copper then activates the enzymes to slice and dice the oxidants.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I think it is.
I mean, I do too.
And I think it would be. It should be taught in two places of higher education: kindergarten, and doctor school.
Yeah, why not, right?
Why not? And so I think as more doctors learn how beautiful our system is, and again, this oxygen has been on this planet for a couple billion years, and the planet has been evolving different chemicals and different life forms to manage that oxygen. And what is a mitochondria? It's a bacteria that got hijacked a long time ago. It's absolutely, if you really want to get technical about it, you and I are anaerobic beings that are hosting aerobic bacteria in our cells.
So I have a question about this then, because this kind of leads me into a little bit about the cancer metabolism and the fact that people talk about how, like Otto Warburg in the late 20s talked about when you lower oxygen by 35%, you get this influx of tumor growth and things. But you just said a second ago, which I thought was interesting, copper harnessing oxygen, right? And so it's interesting that a cancer metabolism would occur in a body that wants to utilize oxygen correctly, but it's turning anaerobic. So it makes sense to me that at least in the cancer space, a lack of copper would cause these cells to turn anaerobic because the copper is not there to manage the oxygen, right?
You just went to the head of the class.
Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And what cancer represents is a conflict between Pasteur's theory and Warburg's theory. Okay?
A conflict, you said, between the two?
The Pasteur effect and the Warburg effect. Pasteur said that any organism that's in the presence of oxygen will use it.
Okay.
It's conditioned to use it, right?
Okay.
But as you so aptly noted, Warburg, where did he get his start? Studying sea urchins and the oxygen consumption of sea urchin eggs. Again, we're talking about the substantia nigra with 2 million mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
Egg cells in a mature woman's egg cell has 600,000 mitochondria. So I don't have any in sea urchins, but there are a lot. Eggs of any animal are going to have a lot of mitochondria. So they're going to consume a lot of oxygen. But you got to be very careful here. We have to draw a distinction between level and function. And so the Warburg effect is that oxygen can be present. The level of oxygen can still be there, but it's not functional because of a lack of copper. Now here's the really insane part of oncology. What is the one mineral they're trying to eliminate and destroy in the course of chemotherapy and radiation therapy?
It's got to be copper or magnesium. I don't know which.
Yeah, those are the only two, right?
Yeah.
And so, but copper is especially targeted because they blame copper. Copper and oxygen are two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
We've never been told that, but that's basically how it works. When you have copper, you can work with oxygen. It's a very cool thing. And so that if you have copper deficiency, you have oxygen deficiency. It may be present, but you can't use it. And so copper runs a lot of different genes and a lot of different proteins. Well, one of them is called angiogenesis, the production of new blood vessels to try to do what? Get access to blood. And what does blood do? It's carrying oxygen. And so a fast-growing tumor is going to have a lot of growth. It's going to need to have, more vessels to feed it, right?
Interesting. But why would they go after? Why would those vessels go after oxygen when oxygen apparently is?
Again, you've heard the expression "conserved response."
Okay.
Conserved response. When I had my fateful conversation with Dr. Seneff a couple of years ago, she used that phrase. She said, Morley, there's 16 conserved glycine in ceruloplasmin, and glyphosate is glycine with a nitrogen wart. And I went, ooh. I said, what does that term conserved mean? She says, it means it's really important.
Yeah.
It means it's so important that it's been conserved through generations and generations and generations of evolution. And so the conserved response on this planet is must move oxygen to support tissue. It's so endemic to the tissue, but the tumor doesn't know it doesn't have copper. I mean, it's again,
wow.
the whole field of oncology is standing on its head because it doesn't understand the dynamics of copper and oxygen and how central copper is to regulating oxygen metabolism on the planet.
And just so we are clear or we understand correctly, retinol and its relationship to ceruloplasmin and copper working correctly, is that the main sort of driver of what allows copper to work, or is it retinol and there's a few other ones that also are required for copper to work?
Well, if we were talking with Joseph Prohaska, who's a world-renowned copper expert, he would tell us that there are 9 copper enzymes.
Okay.
If we were talking with Dr. Carlin, his signature article from 1993 in Science tells that there are 30 copper enzymes. And if we were talking with Leslie Clavet, who's an MD, PhD, very, very savvy guy, very, very bright clinician and researcher, he would tell us that it's closer to 100 copper enzymes. There's no uniformity of agreement around how many enzymes are influenced by copper, but what's important to recognize is that there's a hierarchy to enzyme function, and the ones at the very top of the apex are all controlled by copper. Why? Because they're all involved with making energy. And so think the main protein that helps copper to do its work is called ceruloplasmin. It was discovered in 1948 by 2 Swedish physiologists, Holmberg and Laurel. And think of it as a V8. And think of ceruloplasmin as putting the pistons in the engine.
Okay.
Can't put the pistons in. So pistons are the copper, right? And the engine doesn't work without those pistons, does it?
Right.
And so retinol is what actually puts the 8 pistons into the engine so that it can actually run and enable activity to take place.
And just so people know, retinol is true vitamin A, which comes from animals, not beta carotene from carrots, correct? Just want to make that clear. Yeah.
No, I came across a really amazing study by Dr. Hibbard, Hibbard, 2017, talking about micronutrients in the gut. Everyone loves to talk about their microbiome, right? And there's a figure 2A. I'll send it to you. It's going to blow your mind when you realize the microbiome is completely different when retinol is in the diet versus beta carotene versus retinol palmitate versus other forms of synthetic vitamin A. And again, we've been raised to believe that grass-fed butter and grain-fed butter and margarine and canola oil are all the same. But they're not. They have completely different biology, and they have completely different chemical impact inside our body. And so the energy and the frequency of retinol is completely different than the energy and the frequency of beta carotene. They are not at all one and the same. It takes 12 beta carotene to make 1 retinol. The public doesn't know that. You'd have to eat a room full of carrots to equal what you get from a tablespoon of cod liver oil. And the public doesn't know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And we've been conditioned to think that we've got to go green, we've got to go vegan. And it's, I don't want to get into religious wars, but we are animals, and we need animal nutrients in order to get the fullest expression of our genome. And a wonderful book for people to read who might have some doubt about that would be by Kate Shanahan, and it's called Deep Nutrition. Kate with a C, C-A-T-E, Kate Shanahan, MD. And she took the work of Weston A. Price, and she put a modern spin on it. And it's It's a wonderful book for people who really want to understand why nutrient-dense food is so important.
Deep Nutrition. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So in order for us to get copper, you've mentioned this before, but there's always new listeners and people find us in new ways. And, this is always, could be a first time someone's heard you. So kind of want to reiterate a little bit.
Perish the thought.
I know, right? So with copper, your people know this and most of our listeners know this too, but just for those that are new. So copper needs to be there in our diet, right? And it needs to be activated with retinol so that it can load the copper into the ceruloplasmin. So it's not, I guess, what you would call unbound, right? You want to make sure it's bound up and usable.
Exactly.
And so copper can be found in the form of, you mentioned beef liver, whole food vitamin C, bee pollen, and there's other forms of it as well, right?
There are, but those are the three principal. And again, a lot of people always wrinkle their nose about liver for two reasons. One, they have vivid memories of eating it. And I've got I've talked to 6,000 people, and I've got a list of 12 people who got excited when I said they should be eating beef liver.
I know, right?
I get that.
Yeah.
But the other thing, the other pushback is always, it has so much iron.
Right.
Now, properly raised, properly cared for cattle produce livers that have twice as much copper as they have iron. Again, the catch is the farmer needs to be feeding the soil minerals to make sure that they're there.
Mm-hmm. And so what I say about when people balk at this kind of thing, I mean, it's one of those things for me, Morley, I'm sure it is for you, where you just do things because you know it's the right thing to do, and you kind of man up and you say, okay, when you understand what copper does in the body and how critical it is for the absorption and for the utilization of oxygen, which, is tied to cancer. Like when you understand this, you just do it because it's the right thing to do. It's like when your mom used to tell you to eat vegetables as a kid, you didn't want to do it. You just do it because it's the right thing to do. And for me, it's like if I think, copper's good and their beef liver has copper, but until I fully understand it, it's not going to make me eat the beef liver because it's so gross. But if you understand it, the why, then I'll eat it no matter what it tastes like,
Right. Well, I think it's very well said. And what everybody wants is more energy. And what I can confidently say now that this root cause protocol is, we download, I think about 2,000 people a month download that protocol every month.
That's great.
And and again, does everyone do it the same way? Probably not. Does everyone have success? No, but the bulk of people do. And what is the consistent refrain that people have? I can't believe how much energy I've got. And so it's not rocket science. The mitochondria must have copper and retinol to work right. And no one's ever told us that. No one ever told us that our immune system, this amazing resource that we have, again, all the focus in COVID-19 was on the particle. No one was over here talking about the bioenergetic field of our immune system.
No.
Which is all based on mitochondria. And if we just drilled in on the T cells, there's B cells and T cells that really run the adaptive immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And those T cells have 5 different forms. And there's Th1, helper T cell 1, and helper T cell 2. Well, helper T cell 1 likes to go after the pathogen. Helper T cell 2 likes to make antibodies. Then there's Th17. Well, that's like a macrophage. And then there's regulatory T cells, and there's memory T cells. So there's 5 different types of T cells. Just that one cell type, T cell, 5 different forms, and it's got to know. Your description at the beginning of the conversation was perfect. Which arms and legs and hands am I going to be using? That's just with T cells. That takes thought. That takes intelligence. That takes energy. In order to support that kind of thought process, to be able to discern what's happening in the environment. Do I recognize this? Do I need a new antibody to fight it? And again, the consistent messaging back was that there were certain classes of people that were all equally immunocompromised, older, over 80, 50, and what we were talking about before, and they couldn't make the energy. Why? Because they were too iron toxic and they didn't have enough bioavailable copper in their immune system, in their mitochondria, to mobilize a response. And I think what you said was so fascinating was, so with this one pathogen was able to collapse the entire immune system and all the backup systems and everything else. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Well, our ancestors didn't have that problem. This is a modern phenomenon that has emerged in this era of, I don't know what a mineral is. I didn't know that my medications were stealing my minerals. I didn't know that glyphosate was a copper chelator down to a pH of 1. I didn't know any of that. And so we are living in a desert-like environment where the health professionals that we rely on don't know what copper is, don't really know what the immune system is, are obsessed with the particle, and don't understand what the bioenergetic field is all about.
Yeah,
it's a really scary thought.
Yeah,
they've been trained for a completely different world that we live.
Yeah, it's fascinating how little people understand really about minerals and how important they are. So it's difficult to talk about copper because we've just sort of been talking about one little aspect of copper, not all. I mean, and even if you were to exhaust all of your knowledge, even that is still just another little aspect of copper. It's so complex. And I'm interested in, like you mentioned, things that deplete copper. And it made me think about the inverse relationship between copper and iron. You know, how when one goes up, the other goes down, and there's a tie in there, because we haven't really talked about iron, and we've done that on other interviews that people can listen to. But this inverse relationship and how complex copper is as a metal in relationship to oxygen and iron is fascinating. So when iron accumulates, does copper automatically go down?
It's yes and no.
Okay.
Let's back up one step. If you don't have copper in your diet, iron will accumulate. And as iron accumulates, it will make the copper that you do have less and less bioavailable. So it's kind of a two-stroke process.
Interesting. Yeah.
Now, they've known about the copper-iron dynamic since 1928. And again, during the lockdown, I was able to find 5 different studies using different approaches, different authors, that all came to the same conclusion. If you don't have copper in your diet, you're going to accumulate iron. Well, the difficulty is when you turn those packages around to look at the ingredients, there's no copper identified, there's no magnesium identified. What do they focus on? Calcium and iron. And vitamin D. Very rarely do they talk about vitamin A. Always talk about vitamin D, and they'll talk about vitamin C, but not tell you that that's ascorbic acid. And so there's a very distinct bias in the nutrient labeling that has nothing to do with our vitality.
No.
Because the fastest way to kill energy production is to focus on calcium and iron. Fastest way.
Interesting. Yeah. So
most people don't know that.
So the things that deplete are the biggest contributors to depleting copper, like you said, glyphosate, medications, ascorbic acid. What else?
Too much zinc.
Too much zinc.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D.
Hormone D.
Hormone D. Absolutely. Again, the medications list is very long. You know, the fluoroquinolones, the benzos, the anti-anxiety drugs, cardiac drugs. I mean, there's category after category after category.
And do the medications lower copper to different varying degrees depending on the medication, I would think?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The people who are really severely compromised are people who took benzos, and it really messes up the copper metabolism in the brain.
What are those, benzos?
Benzodiazepine, lorazepam.
Okay.
You know? So the other side is that I found a very important study from 1965. I know most people would say, "Oh, that's too old." No,
Yeah.
that's where the gold is.
I know.
And so this study at Florida State University by Earl Frieden, who was a preeminent expert in copper and iron back in the 50s, 60s through the 90s. But it was a study of copper enzymes and oxygen metabolism. Again, they are hand in glove.
Yeah.
That's the way they work. And so this is on the third page of the study. I haven't even gotten to the rest of the study. I was like so stunned by what I was reading. But that radiation, in this case we're talking about radiology radiation.
Okay.
But that radiation oxidizes copper, so it turns it from a +1 state to a +2 state. Well, then it loses its ability to respire, to be involved in the mitochondria. Think that's a big deal?
Oh my gosh. That's
the
huge.
Justin, that's the mechanism of COVID-19. When people are talking about 5G, they're talking about the oxygen wasn't working right. Well, if there's not copper there to harness that oxygen, you got a problem.
Wow. That is crazy, crazy. So when people talk about, there's a lot of people in the natural sort of community, and you know who these people are, who do hair mineral analysis and do other kinds of testing. And the general consensus is in the natural world, oh, I've got copper pipes, I'm copper toxic. Explain a little bit about that, because it all kind of ties into ceruloplasmin, right? And how that activates and makes copper bioavailable or not. So where are these people going wrong, do you think, when they're saying that people are copper toxic? And is that possible? I know you get this question a lot, but is that possible?
Oh, no. It's very much a reality. And the social meme in society, especially here in America, is I'm anemic and I'm copper toxic.
Right.
And the truth is 180 degrees. In fact, you are drowning in iron because you are a copper desert. Now, where does the confusion come in? Is that a lot of practitioners do use either a hair test or a blood test, and it can show that copper looks high. But the question that's never been asked, why is it high? How did that happen? Again, there's this implicit assumption that, well, copper is a rogue element and it gets pissed off and it just starts going unbound and then we got to deal with it. And so when copper is inside ceruloplasm, it's like a Eagle Scout. But when it comes outside of ceruloplasm, it becomes a drug addict. And there's this belief that, well, suddenly these Eagle Scouts get hormone crazed and they become drug addicts. And what do we do with drug addicts? Well, we're going to put them in jail and get rid of them. When in fact, why don't we ask what happened? How did the Eagle Scout become the drug addict? Well, it happened because it came out of the protein. Once the protein got breached by ascorbic acid, hormone replacement therapy, antibiotics, and so on and so forth.
Zinc, vitamin D, high fructose corn syrup, glyphosate, again and again and again. So once the ceruloplasm breaks apart, the coppers come out literally like diarrhea. They don't come out one and then they just poof, they come out. And when they're unbound, they're not as happy as they are when they're bound. Well, instead of putting them in jail or getting rid of them, what we do is we use real vitamin C, which brings them back into the protein, which is where they belong. Oh, so that's what whole food vitamin C will do. Right. It brings back the unbound copper that's been jettisoned or maybe never fully loaded into ceruloplasm, and it puts them back into ceruloplasmin.
It puts it back into circulation.
So one quick question. I'm really curious about this. So that assumes that there is enough ceruloplasmin always for the amount of copper we have, or can we make ceruloplasmin to make sure there's enough of it to shuttle it around and keep it bound?
Again, we're on a planet. We're on a planet with oxygen, and ceruloplasmin is very important as a protein to scavenge free radicals, oxidants.
Okay.
Free radicals and oxidants are the same thing.
Okay.
What's an oxidant? An oxidant is an accident with oxygen.
Okay.
We know what antioxidants are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the oxidant that ceruloplasmin is focusing on.
Okay.
And so there's, again, a conserved response in our body to oxygen. We're breathing it in, and the body says, I better have enough ceruloplasmin to deal with it. And here's the catch. The liver and other tissue, the brain, the retina, the kidneys, and a number of other tissues, our gonads, make ceruloplasmin. Our intestines make a different form called hephaestin, but they're basically cousins. They do the same thing. About a woman's womb, your wife had a copper protein that she didn't even know about, and her OB didn't know about, called zyklopene, another cousin, very important. But all of these copper proteins are there to manage and regulate oxygen. And the difficulty is not everybody has enough copper in their diet to load up these proteins to make them fully functional. That's where the breakdown is because most people eat a low-fat diet, which means a low retinol diet. Again, a lot of people love avocados, and they think that because avocado is spelled with A, that it's just like vitamin A, and it's not.
Right.
So that fat in avocado is not helping you load copper into ceruloplasmin. No one's ever told them about ceruloplasmin. And all these practitioners that use hair tests and blood tests to measure copper, well, first of all, you can't measure copper. You can't measure ceruloplasmin in a hair test. It's impossible.
And that's the thing that you'd want to know, right?
That's absolutely. As soon as you express an interest in understanding copper, you need to move over and say, well, let me study ceruloplasmin, because that's what makes it usable in the human body.
So when they're testing this and they're seeing high levels of copper in someone's blood or whatever it is they're looking at, and your copper levels are high, what is the copper doing when it's not loaded into ceruloplasmin? What is it? Does it act like an oxidant and causes oxidative damage and things?
Well, there is the mythology is that copper becomes unbound.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I found the article, it's fascinating, where it said when we say unbound copper, we're referring to unbound from ceruloplasmin.
Okay.
That's an important thing to understand.
You got to know that.
There is no unbound copper in the human body. It's going to get bound to albumin. It's going to get bound to transcuprine. It's going to get bound to some, maybe histidine. It's going to be bound to something.
Interesting.
But it's not going to be functional in that sense. And what they love to do is do studies of atherosclerosis or neurodegeneration, and they'll introduce exogenous copper and blame the condition on the introduction of something that came from outside the tissue. It's like, no, the body doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so the copper works best. It's designed by Mother Nature and our maker to work inside these proteins, inside these enzymes. And when they're not being exposed to toxic chemicals or toxic food agents or toxic radiation like 5G, they work beautifully. And they work exactly the way they're supposed to work. Excuse me, exactly the way Mother Nature intended that they would work, to regulate iron and harness oxygen. And that's the beauty of copper. And the confusion is the people who work with hair tests never measure ceruloplasmin. That's a bozo no-no. And the people who measure the blood test and were looking at copper, they don't measure ceruloplasmin either because they didn't know it was relevant. And so what's really important is you got to do both copper and ceruloplasmin, and there's a ratio. And the serum level of copper divided by ceruloplasmin should be 3.33.
Okay.
And that's from research from 1960 by Steinberg and Scheinlieb. Very important research. And nobody knows about it. It's not taught in any doctor's school. And so what's important about that ratio is that the number should hold true regardless of what level of copper and ceruloplasmin is in the body.
Okay.
It's when the ratio becomes 5.6 or 2.2, then you go, oh, something's wrong. And the copper metabolism has been breached, and as soon as copper metabolism gets breached, you know you have iron metabolism. It's a runaway freight train, literally, and it's causing oxidative stress in the tissues.
So these minerals, copper being able to utilize oxygen correctly, and then being able to harness and to regulate iron, the indirect or the direct byproduct of that is the ability to create ATP, which then allows your immune system to work correctly, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. It's all about, again, it's all about making energy. One thing we know will always be on this planet is stress.
Mm-hmm.
Always
That's for
stress.
sure. Yeah.
And the best definition I've ever seen of stress is by Mark Hyman. And he said, stress is the body's inability to make energy for the mind to respond to its environment. It's all about managing the stress, all about perceiving it and then responding to it. We do that with energy. We got to think it through. And the way we describe it in the RCP is we're metabolizing the stress because we're making energy so that we can work our way through and way past that stress. And what most people don't realize is that when you're under acute stress, we're going to lose a lot of magnesium and B vitamins. They're water soluble, and they leave like that very quickly. But under chronic stress, like you've been locked in your home for 2 months, you've had to wear a mask, you've not been able to meet your friends at a restaurant, yada yada yada. Well, that begins to affect the liver, and it starts to make a protein called metallothionein. What does metallothionein do? It binds up copper 1,000 times stronger than it binds up zinc. So people can't relate to 1,000 times stronger. Justin, picture someone that you know who's twice as strong as you. I can tell by your physique that you've worked out, you've been in gyms. Picture someone in one of those gyms that you were around who could bench press twice what you could.
I know a guy who is famous on the internet, but he came from our town and he fits your description exactly.
Right. So that's twice as strong.
Uh-huh.
Now multiply it by 500. That's what 1,000 times stronger is. It's like it completely shuts it down. Because the body knows that if it gets unbound, it is a problem. And so the body has been working with these minerals and this element called oxygen for 2.5 billion years on the planet and for several 100,000 years in human tissue. I don't want to get into debates about when did it all start or things like that, but there's a really smart guy named Doug Wallace. He's a PhD geneticist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. He's the guy who figured out that the mitochondrial DNA come from the mom. He's the guy that figured out that the origin of civilization started in Africa. And he's the guy that figured out, and that was at 200,000 years ago, and he's the guy that figured out that 60,000 years ago was when the migration started to move from Africa into Eurasia and other parts of the globe.
That guy
Really
is a
smart
mitochondrial maniac, isn't he? I've watched a number of his lectures on YouTube. Dr. Doug Wallace.
Yeah.
He's
Dr. Doug Wallace.
Yeah.
And he's the one who brought to my attention that the glaring defect of doctors, again, across the board, is they're not trained in energy deficiency. They don't know how to measure it, and they don't know how to correct it.
So the whole thing that we're talking about is building a lifestyle through the RCP123, .org, just the root cause protocol, building a lifestyle and diet that supports the ability for the body to properly create energy. So when you do that, it's almost like what you're saying, people are focused on the particle versus the field. When you do that, your body has the necessary tools to deal with COVID-19, cancer, pathogens, dementia. You build the host and you remove those things that deplete copper and the body's ability to create energy. And then you have a properly functioning human body, right? That's just kind of the essence of it, right?
It's homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
The nutrients are in balance. The energy is in balance. Again, there's a constant turnover. Again, think about every heartbeat is 1 billion ATP that need to be expended. And what's interesting about the heart is there's only 5,000 mitochondria per cell, as opposed to the substantia nigra, which is 2 million, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So that tells you how important the substantia nigra is. It needs a lot of energy to keep the body in proper regulation, to make sure that the fine motor neurons don't get affected and start causing problems. No, it's amazing, and that's just the substantia nigra.
Gosh, I watched that video that you sent a few weeks ago on the rotor of the ATPase, and my goodness, that video is from 2009. I think it has 300,000 views or something. It's 11 years old, but a 3-minute video explaining just that one little piece, and you look at the incredible symmetry of the human body and what that one little piece is doing. I mean, I immediately thought of like God and how did we get here? But whatever the case is, we are dealing with such a complex organism that is so incredible in terms of how it actually works. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But there's a simplicity to it, and there's an enormity to it. And my dear colleague, Christiane Kershaw, who helps me run this RCP enterprise, she's the one who came up with those two words, the simplicity and the enormity. It's absolutely true that the body is complex. There's a lot of moving parts, but it is not complicated. Once you understand the central role of energy, how it's made, literally how it's mineralized, it really begins to change your sense of confidence. There's a video that I've got out there that I did at the beginning of COVID-19. It's called 3 Simple Words. And I talk about faith, fear, and cure. And I spell fear differently. I spell it Fe-AR, so people can see the symbol for iron.
Uh-huh.
And I spell cure differently, Cu-RE, so people can see the symbol for copper.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand the primal role of copper on this planet and in our body, it gives you an incredible sense of confidence that you have the cure and there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
I love that. There's that famous quote that says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And that's so apropos when you have the knowledge, fear eradicates. And Morley, I've been doing, sometimes during your talk, I'll do a little thing in our chat room, and I've been threatening this whole time to take some questions from our chat room. So do you want to take a couple right now?
Sure.
Okay. Let me load this up really quick. So we've been going for an hour and a half. Let's do a few questions here because I want to make sure you get out on time too. But the first question is just super, super basic from a great guy I know, Dr. Ace Harden, and he asks, according to your research, how much copper does the body actually need for optimal health per day?
I put it around 90 milligrams. There's some that will go down as low as 70, some that go as high as 100, but there seems to be uniformity around the 90 milligrams. So in terms of total, in terms of how much per day, we probably need 2 to 3, maybe as much as 5 milligrams a day. I've seen studies where they've administered 10 milligrams, but the average American gets 0.7 milligrams of copper a day. You
Point
can't run the
seven.
body on that.
No
0.7.
way.
You can't-
Not with all
you
that
can't run
excess
it.
iron, right?
Mm-mm. Again, people don't think about the iron fortification that's taking place on this side, and the fact that copper is just not enough in our diet.
It's
And
not
it
only
really-
not enough, but it's been lowering, like you mentioned too. So the iron is lowering, and we're not eating enough. And then you have iron filings from the 40s and 60s that have been doubling and things, right?
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
again, iron is everywhere. Iron is everywhere.
So we covered this one here about the best food sources: whole food vitamin C, bee pollen, and beef liver. Are there other ones too that you like or that you recommend?
Well, we're exploring some transdermal. There's a company called Reverse Skin Aging up in Seattle, Washington.
I know
I
about
think they're
them.
I think they're just coming online now. They were shut down for several months, or a couple months anyway. And they have creams and a copper serum that we're looking into, and then they provided the source of copper for a patch. It's called the X39 patch.
Okay.
And we're just, Dr. Liz and I are just getting our first patches in the next couple of days. And the only caution there is that's a network marketing. And I don't get in the middle of network marketing. I don't want people to think I'm pimping for products, but apparently people that have used it have been very impressed with its restoring copper status. So again, there's always going to be a way to administer it. And that's one that we're kind of intrigued by, and we're going to look into it.
Interesting. Yeah. I've heard you mention them before. So is that more of a like a skin based, obviously reverse skin aging?
Absolutely.
It's based on skin.
The thing is, skin must have copper. It's very important. And so beauty isn't just skin deep, though.
Mm-hmm.
The tissue will absorb it, and it will find its way into deeper and deeper parts of the anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another transport mechanism for getting copper into the body.
Interesting. So as far as copper supplements, someone asks, I don't think that's recommended, right? Because you want this from
the
food,
difficulty
right?
the difficulty is the copper supplements are all there's two forms of copper. You have copper 1 and copper 2 in terms of the valence.
Okay.
And the copper supplements are all +2. Well, in order to get into our cells, it needs to be reduced to 1. And there's enzymes, they're called reductase enzymes, and they've been ravaged by antibiotics. So there's a shortage of reductase enzymes in our body to do the proper work to turn copper in a state that it can be properly absorbed. But it's the +2 state that that copper is found. And so we just have to be really sensitive that that's not the kind of copper we need, because copper 2 is not going to be absorbed right, and it's not going to help us.
It's interesting because that sort of insinuates you need, like you talked about how when people do detoxes and things, what's required to do a detox is energy. And so to bring that 2 valence state down to 1, you would need energy for that too, right? So that's required, required by energy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't ascribe to detoxes, because I know that the liver, when it's properly mineralized, has 500 different enzymes that it runs to keep me healthy. I just don't worry about it. I don't do these one-off detoxes because what that's telling the liver is, I don't trust you. You're not smart enough, and I'm going to do a manual override of your genius.
Right. I just laughing at someone in the forum or in the chat. They said, "Please send this podcast to the Harvard doc that Morley tried to wake up." That would be funny, right?
Yeah,
well,
exactly. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think I would tend to agree with that.
That's funny. So, we do not consent asks, do you buy into the germ theory?
No.
No.
I mean, are there germs out there? Of course there are. But what do they live on? All pathogens, with the exception of the 2 that are associated with Lyme disease, because everyone's got to have the exceptions, right?
Right.
99.9999% of all pathogens on the planet live replicate, and thrive on an iron buffet. Ding, ding, ding. And so why don't we lower the iron footprint in the body? And what do all pathogens cave in the presence of? Copper. There have been several articles in the last 2 months, if anyone's been looking, there have been 3 that I found that really highlighted the importance of copper as anti-pathogenic metal. Well, now they're talking about copper surfaces and copper doorknobs and copper push plates and this and that. It's like, it works the same way inside the body. We want to get that copper inside our cells because it's anti-pathogenic. And the pathogens can't take up residence when it knows that the frequency is being run by copper. It's a completely different frequency than the frequency of iron.
Makes so much sense. Somebody wants to know how you got started studying copper, because like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, you focused on magnesium at the beginning, and now you're focusing on iron. But how did you get started focusing on copper? What's the story there?
Well, my mentor, who I love dearly, his name is Rick Malter, he was always talking about copper toxicity. And I began to question, is it always toxic? And this goes back about 7 or 8 years ago. And I started reading, and I'm a curious George, you know that. And I came across this thing called ceruloplasmin. I went, huh? And by the grace of God, I stuck with it. And now I are one. I mean, I just have really focused on it. And as I was telling my wife this morning at breakfast, I said, I'm only now, 8 years into this process, only now am I beginning to understand the importance of copper. And what happened today? I found that doctor up at Hopkins. And that's his whole focus. So it's like, so now I'm finally ready to really delve into it. But it was a fascination with what's really driven a lot of my research. And I think we may have talked about this in the beginning. Again, if convention is telling me to go this way, I'm always going to go that way. And so when everyone was telling me that everyone's copper toxic, I began to question that. And when I began to question, I began to realize that copper comes in 2 states, usable and unusable. And another analogy that people could use is think of copper as a wild horse. And we've seen pictures of wild horses, or we've seen movies with wild horses, or we might have actually been on a ranch with wild horses. And they're beautiful animals. But when does a wild horse become useful to a farmer? When it has a harness or a bridle. Because then you can put that wild horse to use, and you can plow a field, or you can deliver product, or you can go for a ride in your Surrey or whatever. But the horse has incredible energy, has horsepower, right? But it's been harnessed. And what harnesses copper in our body is the protein ceruloplasmin. And it has profound functions. I've identified like 24 different enzyme functions. And again, the average Joe doesn't know that. The average practitioner doesn't know that. And I knew when I asked that question of the doctor this morning, I just wanted to see, I wanted to see the look on his face when I said copper. And it was fascinating to see his eyes like I had spooked him. So again, that just reveals the awareness of society is we've got a long way to go. And I'm very grateful for these conversations because more and more light bulbs go off. And people need to know that the body does have these very powerful mechanisms to keep us in balance once we understand the principles of how these minerals work.
Someone wanted to know about X-rays, like just getting an X-ray or an MRI. Does that have an effect on copper? Do we even know that? I wonder if that's even known.
It is a possibility. I wouldn't start freaking out about it. But this article by Dr. Frieden that was referring to research by Dr. Schubert in 1965 certainly suggested that there's a lot to radiation that we don't know, that there's ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. The blue light that's allowing our computers to work and emit images is based on blue light. Well, blue light is the beginning of the ionizing radiation spectrum. What does that mean? Well, that means that it's able to produce hydroxyl radicals. Why is that a problem? Well, hydroxyl radicals are the most violent biomolecule on planet Earth, and it causes things to rust. But there's a catch. Ceruloplasmin loves to scavenge superoxide. There's a whole enzyme family called superoxide dismutases that love to scavenge that. But those enzymes run on the energy of copper. And ceruloplasmin runs on the energy of copper. So people just need to know that, again, our original wiring, the original manufacturing of our body, had all these mechanisms and enzymes and minerals that have been changed over the course of the last 75 to 100 years based on changes in farming, changes in food processing, and changes in pharmaceutical interventions.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Ciara wants to know, listening live, this is a question you get a lot, I know, but what about taking desiccated liver for copper?
Yeah, we all know that it's not the same as the real deal, but it's a good start. And I've got 25 vegan clients taking desiccated liver. I think that's a victory. Not that they're taking animal products, but that they're finally getting the nutrients that are only found in that organ, and they are feeling much better. They've got energy, and they're seeing symptoms that have been with them lifelong disappear left and right.
Mm-hmm. Angie wants to know, so would taking copper help COVID-19 patients since they seem to have a problem with oxygen levels, with all those masks and, respirators and things? Would copper help them?
Well, the quick answer is yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's go back. Let's turn back the time clock to 1955, and they did an experiment with people with schizophrenia. People may not know what actually causes schizophrenia. It's when adrenaline gets oxidized and it becomes adrenochrome. And the people who are really hip know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
but that's but that's the chemical that causes schizophrenia. There is a chemical that creates that state. And the reason why I was studying this was my dad was a manic depressive that had schizophrenic tendencies. And I was always curious to know, gee, what was behind that? So in 1955, Dr. Martins, who was a professor at Louisiana State University Medical Center in New Orleans, very smart guy, he gave ceruloplasmin to 30 schizophrenic patients.
What do you mean he gave it, like as a supplement?
Yeah, apparently Big Pharma had developed a way to make it synthetically.
Oh.
1955.
Wow,
Again,
interesting.
Long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Now, 30 patients got it. How many do you think were cured of schizophrenia like that?
I don't know.
Pick a number. Ask Angie to pick a number.
I know. 80%, 90%.
26 out of 30.
Wow.
Justin, that's a staggering statistic. Now here's the dilemma. I'll give you $1,000 for every doctor you know that can get access to ceruloplasmin. It's not available. And so Angie's asking a very provocative question because here's my heartache about COVID-19. Every recommendation, whether allopathic or alternative, is killing bioavailable copper.
I know, right?
Because high dose ascorbic acid, high dose zinc, high dose vitamin D, hydroxychloroquine, D-ROX, what is it? It's a metal chelator. It chelates iron and zinc and copper. Thank you very much. Oh, and then let's put in a we're going to pump in some azithromycin. What's the Z-Pak do? It wipes out 40% of the copper enzymes in the liver. So it's, again, sometimes I think I know too much, right? So the problem is all of those recommendations, allopathic or alternative, were attacking the guest. No one's thinking about what it's doing to weaken the host. And that's what we're all about. We're trying to strengthen the host.
Part of one of those protocols you mentioned was also combined with zinc, right? Which does further the same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Again,
So
zinc is very good at lowering bioavailable copper, period.
now, does zinc cause the ceruloplasmin to be misformed and jettison copper, or does it prevent it from being loaded into ceruloplasmin?
Zinc prevents copper absorption in the gut. That's its biggest problem.
Okay.
And the lifespan of ceruloplasmin, we're getting into some real technical stuff here. This is a keeper of a conversation. I hope people appreciate this.
Yeah.
So unloaded ceruloplasmin, no copper in it. It's called apoceruloplasmin. Lasts for 6 hours. Fully loaded ceruloplasmin, it's called holoceruloplasmin, holo,
Okay.
lasts for 6 days. And so do people take zinc just 1 day a week? No. They take zinc 7 days a week. I talked with a client the other day, and on their own, they decided to take 200 milligrams of zinc a day. Well, 15 milligrams is what's recommended. 30 would be a lot. Jeez. I've had some clients that took 45. But again, without any consideration to what it was going to do to their copper status, and they had raging symptoms of copper deficiency.
Wow.
And now they're in the process of undoing all that. But again, zinc is the media darling. Vitamin D, media darling. Iron, media darling. Calcium, media darling. Who do you know that talks about copper besides you and me?
I know, right? Not many.
No?
It's fascinating. All right, we're gonna end this on this question, and it's kind of like we could go on, but I just want to give people a sort of a brief overview of it, and then I want you to tell people about the root cause protocol, because I recommend you guys look into this and join what you have going on, Morley, because it's so important. People getting lost in all these medicinal mushrooms, which are all great, but my goodness, the complex that the medicinal mushrooms effects on the body is nothing like magnesium. 42% of our 9,000 enzymes run on magnesium. So talk to people a little bit about that, but this is sort of a deep question, but just very briefly, Tracy says here, I wasn't under the impression that vitamin D also, or I was under the impression that it's essential for the human body. I wasn't aware that it depletes copper. So without going too deep into that, maybe give her a little teaser of what you have to say about vitamin D that she can research further on your website.
Right. So I've been speaking against supplemental D for a modest 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
There are only maybe 15 people that are willing to consistently take that stance. People want to really learn more about why vitamin D is dangerous. Go to Jim Stevenson Jr.'s Facebook group, Seco-Steroid Hormone D group. Amazing information there. Seco-Steroid Hormone D group. And so vitamin A and vitamin D are biological partners and biological antagonists. They're on a seesaw together, okay? And they have a very important relationship. And so everyone has been trained to believe that when we go out into the sunshine, we start to make vitamin D. Oh, I can turn my cholesterol into vitamin D. Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually two transactions that occur in sunlight. One is the synthesis of vitamin D, but the other is the catalytic breakdown of vitamin A into the component parts that run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of aspects of our anatomy and our physiology. And nobody talks about vitamin A. Why? Well, it was very popular in the 1920s, the 1910s and 1920s. And that's when the Nobel Prize was given back in the 1910s for discovering vitamin A. Very, very important. What were they doing with vitamin D back then? They were throwing it away because it didn't do anything. And now, of course, we're supposed to believe, oh, it activates 1,000 genes in my body. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge and a used BMW I'd love to sell you. but what's important for people to understand is that it isn't the storage D that is active. It's called storage D for a reason. It is in storage. It doesn't do anything. When does it become active? When it gets kissed by magnesium in the kidney, principally. And it's the active metabolite that has all of the life-saving properties. The whole immune function that vitamin D gets all the credit for is based on the active metabolite, but there's a catch. Active D works when it's connected to a nuclear receptor called RXR. And RXR is a retinoid receptor that is a derivative of retinol that you can only get if you have retinol in your diet, and it gets broken down when you're in the sun to allow it to be broken down. Again, it's a very important part of our physiology, and there are articles that talk about the symmetry and the balance between A and D. And yes, I'm not a Luddite. I know that D is important, but what I also know is that when D is low, it's 1, maybe the range is not right. There's no benefit to being above 21, and that's the work of Mohammed Amer back at Hopkins. Secondly, when vitamin D is perceived low, it means one of two things. Either magnesium is low in the liver, or iron is high in the liver, and both of those mineral dynamics will cause the enzyme to make storage D not work. And so the third thing that people need to know about vitamin D is that low vitamin D is a sign of inflammation. It's like a billboard, right? Does the billboard sell the product? No, it just tells you about the product, right? And so taking vitamin D will not correct the inflammatory process. All it's doing is saying, we have an inflammatory process. It's a communication vehicle. What causes inflammation? There are only 2 mineral events: low magnesium, high iron. Oh, well, those are the same things that were causing that vitamin D enzyme to not work right. And again, all of this isn't taught. And so people are approaching it like grade schoolers, like it's a ruler function. Oh, my dipstick is low.
Mm-hmm.
Well, vitamin D is not a dipstick function. It is an algebraic function. There are multiple variables, and in the same way that we know what miles per gallon means, well, you need to understand the ratio of vitamin A to vitamin D, and you also need to know the ratio of active D to storage D. And those are things that we worry about within the root cause protocol.
So these are things that should be, in my opinion, but they should be talked about. So give a little plug, Morley, too. I'm going to bring up your site as you talk about this, but from personal experience, I would recommend everyone go to the root cause protocol. I'm going to bring it up for those that are watching on Facebook or YouTube. Go to the rcp123.org, and if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, sign up. Okay, so you're going to learn about, we just scratched the surface here of one mineral, and there's so much more that I believe Morley's talking about that people aren't talking about, and it's going to be the catalyst for the foundation of your health. So tell a little bit more, Morley, about what you have going on at rcp123.org.
Yeah, so this is, thank you for bringing it up. This is the link where people just enter their email address, and we will send you a 32-page document that explains the rationale behind this protocol. We have a series of stops, and there's a series of starts. And what will be disorienting for people is that they're doing many of the stops, and they don't realize that that's actually weakening their immune system. And we have phases to the starts, and there are 3 phases, and we're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible so that people can begin to incorporate this and allow it to become a part of their lifestyle, as you described it. That's me with Dr. Ben Edwards. He's on the scientific advisory panel, and he's very savvy internist in Lubbock, Texas. And
Nice.
He was the first physician who was trained in the RCP, and he and his 9 nurse practitioners were the first bolus of people to really go through the training.
Oh, wow.
And
we should have him on as well. Yeah.
Oh, you should. He's just a wonderful guy. And we have a 4.5-hour video that people can buy. And it's just the 2 of us talking about the protocol. Why does it work? Why do we address these stops? Why are these so important to eliminate from our routine? And again, it's all to stop the nonsense and the confusion inside the body. Your intro was talking about the communication between the workers. Well, when you're taking those stops, the communication shuts down. There's all sorts of confusion. And so the starts are phased in, phase 1, 2, 3, and then we have what we call phase X, which is ongoing. The people need to be donating blood and getting sunlight, things like that. And we've tried to simplify this. I think it was Einstein who said, if you can't say something simply, then you don't really understand it. So we work every day to try to simplify it. And we have testimonials, and there's a RCP community for people who want to dig a little deeper. We get together twice a month to talk about different topics, do Q&As, things like that. And then for the people who are real curious Georges, there is a training program called the RCP Institute. We're just into the 2nd week of those classes. It's a 14-week program where we teach people the real nuts and bolts of mineral metabolism, particularly as it relates to this protocol. And we have the largest class we've ever had. We've got 52 people in our class. This group 12 is the biggest class. We're very excited about that.
That's great.
Twice as many people as we've ever had before.
And how often do you do this?
Well, typically we'll do it 2, maybe 3 times a year. This year is probably only going to be 2 times online. So we're into our 2nd course online. And we're probably going to do an on-site class over a course of a weekend, maybe a long weekend.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be in the fall. And maybe we'll come out to the left coast and do it out there. And have some,
that'd be great.
Just do a 3-day training and really hit it hard and make sure that people understand what the rationale is, what the philosophy is, but more importantly, what the physiology is. And we feel very confident about our research. And I've got thousands and thousands of articles under my belt. And it's been a fascinating process in sort of a late in life, in my mid-50s, to suddenly discover that I had this passion for biochemistry. And by a very providential reading of Ray Peat's article on iron overload, he made a very important comment in that. He said, to my knowledge, no one's ever come up with a recipe to increase ceruloplasmin. I kind of saw that and I went, that's what I'm going to do.
Let's do that.
And let's do that. And that was the origin of the RCP. It was 2 stops and then 2 starts, and then it's grown. It's now about 12 stops and 12 starts, and it's just been a fascinating journey over the last. It's actually coming up on 11 years now.
That's so cool. Well, I'm just really excited to be working with you and having you on the show. And my goodness,
I have to get you in that training. If we do an on-site training, I'm going to make you sit in the front row because I think you'll absolutely love it when you get in the midst of it.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating because, well, thank you for that. And I just think it's so fascinating because I see so much of what's being touted as, places to start in the natural health and healing. And I feel for people because people are so sick and they don't understand. Like, I'll listen to other podcasts with other people and they'll talk about the benefits of vitamin D, and no one's really going into the explanations and at the level that you're going into and how they're affecting enzymes and this, that, and the other. And I just think it's so foundational. So
I want to put in a plug. I'm going to put in a plug for my son Tom, who got a PhD in biochemistry from Stanford. He's, it's proof that apples can fall far from the tree.
No way.
but he gave me a book on enzymes at the beginning of his program. He said, "Dad, I think this is going to be important for you," and I really am grateful for that nudge. And then my other son gave me a book on lies my teacher told me.
Oh, right.
Right. And then my daughters have been kind of a proving ground. So they've all had their fingers in this process, but Matt and Tom in particular have really pushed me to kind of perfect this craft, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's so cool. All right, Morley. Well, thank you again for being on the show. I can't tell you how enough how important I feel your work is and the work that you're doing, and I'm just
very grateful for that.
Yeah, for all the people we've ever talked to, I feel like you are at a level that no one has ever seen in terms of our guests and the people I'm familiar with. And, for you to be sharing this information, I think is so valuable. And maybe I'll be in communication via email because I'd like to get other people who know your work too and get more of your work out there. So yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be wonderful. I think that'd be a phenomenal extension of our conversations. That'd be good.
All right, Morley. Well, what are you going to do rest of today? Anything fun? Can you go out and do anything, or what are you going to do?
Well, I have an email to my ghostwriter who is helping me write a book about energy and about why everyone is so fatigued. It's going to be the root cause of fatigue. What an original idea, right?
Right.
And so over the next 3 months, we're going to bang that book out. And I've got some comments about the first chapter which he's written. It's really very well done, but there's a couple things that need to be tightened up. So that'll be the rest of my afternoon. And then we're going to go for a walk. And then maybe one of the restaurants might be open in town, so we might go do that. Because North Carolina officially opens up today, which is very exciting.
Well, great. Now you can go to the restaurant, eat some food 6 feet away from people, and fit right in.
Don't get me started. So yeah, but you're going to be doing this until the end of July, right?
Oh, well, that's the rumor, and they said that it was only based in LA County. We're down in Orange County, and so we're not sure if that's going to happen to us. But like you, I've yet to wear a mask. I've entered a series of supermarkets where they say a mask is required, and I just walk in and say the least they can do is tell me to take it off or to put one on. And so far, I haven't donned a mask yet.
No, I haven't either. And I've walked into several stores that they had the signs up, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, to give you an idea of how fun the conversation would be with Ben Ebridge, I think you'd really enjoy it. He said, Morley, we already have a mask. It's built in. It's called our mouth and our nose.
It's right on your face already.
Yeah, it's designed to deal with the pathogens. That's its job. It's like,
oh, that's hilarious. Well, Morley, thank you again, my friend. I really appreciate it. And let's do it again. We can dive into any subject from a mineral perspective or anything you want to talk about. I'm game.
Well, and I want to thank you. I knew that colostrum was important, but while your commercial was running, I said, well, what is it I don't know about colostrum? Is that boom, where's retinol? So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to try your product and see what it feels like and see if maybe it's another angle for our protocol.
Well, that's great. You'll absolutely love it, even from just a culinary perspective. But I didn't know it was loaded with retinol, so I learned something too. That's amazing.
What's 20 to 50 times more retinol? That's just,
Yeah, good stuff.
Insane.
All right, Morley.
Well, thank you again. Really appreciate the time together. It's been a lot of fun.
You're so welcome, and I hope this was fun for you. And I'll send you a link when we're done.
That's great.
Awesome.
So much.
Thanks, Morley. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Well, there you go, my friends. Morley Robbins. Man, oh man, I was going to do another commercial. I was going to do another commercial, but geez, we've been going for 2 hours. So I don't think I'm going to run another commercial. But what I will say is, if you guys want to take just a quick look at our Joovv red light therapy device. I'm just going to do this really, really quickly because I think that it's really important. And learning how red light is a copper supplement, basically, like he talked about. Bringing red light therapy into your life is very, very important. So make sure to check out the Joovv red light therapy. I'll put a link down below in the YouTube. And on extremehealthradio.com/658. And also, quick note on the Greenwave filters. If you guys are concerned about dirty electricity in your home, which you probably should be, I don't say be afraid, but just be, mildly concerned that this is a real issue. We did a show with Professor Martin Paul recently talking about how it loads calcium into the center of the cell, and we went into this in depth and what electrical frequencies do to our body. And now from Morley's perspective in relationship to copper, super important. Get these Greenwave filters and put them near your bed in your bedroom, and put them where you work, and start there, and then you can get more throughout the house to mitigate the damaging effects of magnetic frequency and electrical frequency that's coming off the wiring in all of our walls. So those are two good products too, along with the Colostrum and the Relax Far Infrared Sauna. So that's all I'll say about that. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll put links to everything we talked about, hopefully, at extremehealthradio.com/658. 658 is today's show. So, oh my gosh, I just had such a good time, and it was so crazy. 2 hours just flew by like that. And to bring it all together in a way that's usable, that's practical. And as you guys know, we talk to people who talk a lot about minerals, right? Talk a lot about light frequency, talk a lot about non-native EMF, talk a lot about all these different sort of minerals and supplements and all these things that we talk about. And so my job is to put something together that brings in a little bit of what this person talks about, a little bit of what that person talks about, and building a foundation for your health. And that's why I put together the Extreme Health Academy. So come and join us, you guys. I'm telling you guys, it's so much fun. Every day, Monday through Thursday, I'm doing live Zoom calls with everybody at 10 a.m. Pacific time for about an hour or so. And I've been just having the best time getting to know our members on a personal level through video. And so that happens. We're able to support each other, encourage each other, share resources with each other, and really get to the root cause of some of our health challenges. And so this has been really, really fun. And obviously there's over 150 videos, 25 courses in there on all aspects of the human body. So if you're watching this, come and join us down below. There's a link at extremehealthradio.com/658. And let me give you a free 2-week trial coupon code too. If you enter the code EHR14, you'll get a 2-week trial, and you can check it out and come say hello in the forums, say hello in the Zoom chats, and make some friends and get some support and encouragement that you're not the only crazy person that is concerned about your health and your life. There's other people just as crazy as you too. So this is a tremendous resource, and I highly encourage you guys to surround yourself with people that are going to be encouraging to you. And this is what the Extreme Health Academy is all about. All right, guys, we love you so much. Thank you again for listening, for sharing, for following us on Instagram, following us on Facebook. Please share this stuff as much as you possibly can. I'd greatly appreciate it. That would be so, so helpful because of the YouTube algorithms and things. It's really important that you guys share good content. Hopefully this was good for you. So have a great weekend, my friends. We love you all, and I will see you on the next episode.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any information in this blog or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment/cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be continued as such. Always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, prescription drug use, lifestyle, or exercise activities. This information is provided as is, and the reader/viewer assumes all risks from the use, non-use, or misuse